Hello and welcome, everyone. Today is December 3rd, 2024, and we're focused on a Digital World Town Hall meeting. This is a general report out meeting. It will have some council at the end, but we're grateful for you taking the time to update yourself on what's happened during this last week. We'll spend literally just probably 30 minutes going through some of the updates. There's 4 material updates, and then reviewing any kind of feedback or guidance or direction, and then seeing what's next, which is general Q&A. We're grateful for those that are here. It's good to see Al in person today, but Al and Wally, it's wonderful to have you here as co-hosts. As a reminder, this is a private membership association. Some of the things we talk about may be forward-looking. Most of the things we discuss is a solution to this problem. Secret combinations that control things behind the scenes and different industries that work and collude together to basically come in and take over governmental ecosystems and then basically control systems, which will then control humanity, especially when we layer on technology and then artificial intelligence on that technology. Artificial intelligence will help the individual actually manage their life better, and accounts and all of these things that we do all on little islands will come together. But when it comes together with centralized control, what we're talking about, there's a very big negative consequence, and that's in the form of slavery. Slavery is something that's happened for generations over time, but when we talk about technology and linking it together, there's a real problem. The way to combat that problem is through decentralized systems that use what we call derived keys, which is basically how key management and key rotation can actually work in the future. A lot of people may not understand that, but that's the core of what the digital world is all about, is key management and how that can work with existing systems. Today, we're going to talk about a couple different systems and how they've kind of taken off, and some of the things that are actually happening now that President Trump has been reelected. Again, this is 2024, the end of it. The goal is to try and find balance between government and decentralized systems that kind of run amok, if you will. Monero is a perfect example of that. But finding a good balance where things are public and transparent, but honest. And the way to be able to do that is using derived keys. So in this case, you can get 12 or 24 words. Most of the phones that we use and apps that we use are all based upon 24 words or 12 words. And then that ties to you as an individual. It actually manages everything in your world, or it can if you'd like it to over time, such as passwords and apps and data and finances and logins. And in the near future, 2025, you're going to see it taking a stand and massive jump in the health side of things. You'll see alternatives to what we historically have known as Google for search, mail, calendar, contacts, sheets, docs, presentations, etc., or slides. You'll see massive alternatives to what the centralized systems have actually been popping out. And we're excited to be a part of that. This last week, some material things have happened as far as recognition of lawsuits being over. So Gary Gensler resigning from the Security and Exchange Commission in the United States of America, and a lawsuit within Ripple basically initially starting to go away. And I believe that it was one of the best marketing approaches to use a lawsuit to basically drive awareness and set a precedent, a legal precedent, that securities are verified and defining what a security is and defining what a security isn't, at least as it pertains to the supposed laws of the United States of America. And so it's interesting to see what that actually has done. You're seeing EFTs, you're seeing American Express, you're seeing Wells Fargo, lots of different organizations finally looking at this technology and saying, hey, there's something here. And for those of you that are not aware, and I'm not going to dig into the details, I'm not going to dig into dollars and cents, you can see when they originally started, it basically ran for a couple of years, and then it spiked. And then it ran, and it continues to run. Now it's spiking again. I don't believe that this is a non-material spike. This is very calculated on multiple levels. There were movies that came out about this. There's specific things that are currently in the trajectory. Come January, I want to say January 20th, there's going to be some massive things within the United States of America for a currency standpoint that's actually going to shift over. It's important to know that there's a difference between dollars, like with the dollar sign, and USD. They come from two different places, even though we all relate them in our minds to the same thing. Keep that in mind as we talk through things. So you got XRP that's taking off, which is Ripple. And
Are
then,
you sharing your screen?
yeah, I swear. Are the other folks not seeing it again?
Just last.
We're not seeing it.
All right, I started on it though. You guys able to see it now? I need my co-host to pay attention to that, please. You guys know I always share.
Got it.
So I'm going to jump back over here again. So what we were talking about, I'll step up a little bit. So basically, you kind of see the spike here. This is a material takeoff. So you're seeing some massive growth. I personally was involved in this stuff when it was 1 cent, 2 cent, 3 cent to 5 cents. And now it's up to, it basically jumped from 50 cents all the way up to $2.50. So a lot of people may think that that's not material, or it's not a huge jump, or it's not a huge price. But when you look at the total value of actually what's out there, and they've also issued they issued a bunch more today. I want to say 40 million in addition, but these are very material numbers. And when you understand what XRP and cross-border transactions and what Stellar and XLM are planning, and where they come from, Mt. Gox, and prior to that. And when you really understand the maturity of it, when you understand who spun off of this, the whole folks of Ethereum, majority of the folks with Tron, they literally spun out of these environments that are here. And what's happening is you're seeing a legal precedence that being set that this type of technology, which these two are actually ISO certified, can actually do for humanity as far as it talks about payments. I believe that Stellar will do a little bit more around payments, but when you really understand what the digital world is built on, it's actually built on 3 different operating systems. One that is in the server side called ClearOS Server, and it's a binary replacement for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which was bought by IBM for $34 billion in cash and then literally shelved and killed by design. And then you've got, on the other hand, so ClearOS Server is a server operating system that IBM killed by design and closed up. And then you've got Android, which was derived from Google. And we basically built ClearOS Mobile out of that and tore out any of the Google components, and then built our own marketplace, which can do over 200,000 different apps, etc. And then you've got apps that are decentralized apps on that. So you take the storage and server, and there's a model here. I'll show you real fast. Actually, it's already right here. So this model right here is a good illustration of those two components. But what is running in the background of all of this is a chain just like what we see within these environments here. So these chains that you're looking at are really all the same technology: XRP, Stellar, and the digital world. People may not really click in their head, but we believe that the combination of these 3 different operating environments builds an operating system for humanity. Now, when we look at adoption, this is a chart that looks at transactions in 2024. One of the things I want to start with is pointing out Bitcoin, 166 million transactions. Now, Bitcoin has a value and it's somewhat slow, so it's not something that you run an economy off of. Whereas people thought, hey, let's take Bitcoin and let's put a smart contract on it and launch Ethereum. So you've got an Ethereum ecosystem, and then there were ecosystems that duplicated or forked off of that, kind of like Binance or others. But you see Ethereum in 2024, at least year to date, this is 3 days old data, 361 million, okay? This is the first time that we're actually going through and showing you those 2 main chains and how they relate to the digital world. The digital world is only 18 million transactions today. Now, when I say transactions, I'm talking about the last 15 plus years of basically building a platform where things can actually start to operate on it. I'm not talking about creating noise. I'm not talking about things that don't necessarily add value to humanity. But when we start understanding some of the products and services and use cases for what the digital world enables around identity, like total identity. I would argue that none of these different organizations here actually nail identity. And then you combine identity with decentralized storage, and then you enable a whole new financial system, land management system, digital asset management system, all of these new systems that are on top of it. And so what I'm trying to articulate is you see a lot of things that are starting and taking off here. And there's a lot of work that's happened in the past, but they're taking off. So for instance, you see Stellar over here at 3.4 billion transactions. So what I'm trying to articulate is there's an opportunity for a lot of people to learn what the digital world is doing. And so for those that are our live audience here today, by the way, I didn't say boo and hi to them earlier. Hello and welcome, welcome. There's an opportunity for many to actually learn from what this can actually mean for really the world. I'm going to roll out a couple different things. For those that may be listeners, this may be the first time. I'm going to go to clear.companies, and these are basic companies that focus on services around decentralized systems. This is kind of the history. This is some acquisitions. There's one that's missing that was a nightmare. I won't even bring it up, but we're about through that. And what you see as a byproducts from this are stores, or a store that has phones and then storage devices. And what we're going to focus in is on the past phones. So these are all basically sold out, current phones, and then future phones. And some of the elements around, if you notice here, majority of these are basically clear phones and then tied to use cases within different parts of the world. Within the last 90 days, we've signed up contractually and financially 2 countries that basically tie to about 245 million individuals. One of those countries is actually taking these types of phones and building their own image on it. It's not listed here, but they've ordered 120,000 of these units, and they'll basically be rolling them out and making them / assembling them within their own country. So not only are countries starting to build phones, but you're also seeing them starting to build financial systems that are digital. And we'll talk a lot more about those. We can't dig into the details of those, but what we can do is show you how we're doing it for other organizations. Now, some of the things I'm going to show you, this is the first time they've actually been seen in the real world, so to speak. So I'll roll through an interface first and then go through a web environment second. So this is one of the brands that we'll be announcing in 2025. You're seeing a sneak preview of it now, which is the Tesla phone. For those that were not aware, the X phone was already launched, and we've already taken some RSVPs on this particular device as it relates to payments, authentications, and other things. But the Tesla phone is going to be a different animal, whereas it's actually going to tie to an environment for the individual where they can purchase it as well as a service for a nominal fee, or combine them for a very nominal fee. So these phones will work with 3 different carriers in real time, 2 different cellular carriers that are GSM based, and then 1 satellite. That satellite is Starlink. And the goal is to get it down to about $69 a month. That includes the hardware, software, and subscriptions that we just mentioned. The features and functions of the actual phone are built on decentralization at the core. So when we look at that, what we're talking about, and I'm going to jump into the production site now. So what we're talking about is really taking an application called ClearLife that's also been deployed in other environments, Vanuatu Life, Tuvalu Life, Fiji Life, Samoa Life, Hawaiian Life, Mexican Life, and rolling that into an environment that actually links to a user's experience within a phone, and taking the registration, the licensing, and integrating that into one payment that combines the actual hardware, software, and services, and links not only from the phone, but over into other environments, which we'll log in. We'll talk a little bit about. I won't talk about this X login right now, but it's very, very important. There's a lot of work behind the scenes. A lot of it is just communication and getting with the right people. This is basically taking a lot of the different Clear technologies and enabling them, whether for X or for Tesla. I personally see a future where there'll be a Tesla phone, hardware and software and marketplace, but a majority of the apps will actually be tied over to X, whether it's search, whether it's mail, whether it's calendar, contacts, docs, sheets, presentations, web browsers, etc. But they'll all tie to decentralized keys and environments. And that's the goal. There's a lot of advancements and maturing that's happening in the environment today, but Elon Musk talks about an 80% reality that things go well, but it's the 20% that we're worried about. And what we're worried about is basically these derived keys that we talk about here, where an individual doesn't get their own derived keys, or keys that have derived keys that then enable an individual to actually be private. In this environment, you can actually operate without machine learning and artificial intelligence following you and tracking the things that you do. So you can actually have things like vehicle registration and asset management that don't tie to one another. So if you have centralized systems or decentralized systems that have basically been centralized, you don't have liability that comes with that. One of the other things that's really big news is we're working with an organization that actually was competing with the Chinese from an assembly standpoint around rolling out in India. And they actually rolled out for many years and then looking to roll out in the United States of America. So the goal is to basically be able to enable systems where one world, one people, and a lot of the componentry that you see within these environments, the memory, by the way, we're at the beginning 3rd of December, and martial law has been registered in South Korea. South Korea is one of the places that we believe is a hotbed for innovation that's independent of China, as well as Japan and Taiwan. But for the conflicts to be there, for instance, probably 5.5 years ago, we made an offer to purchase the mobile division of LG. There's another company there. I won't be specific, but there's a lot of importance around building in America. And so there's going to be a massive push and focus there. DeSantis has already given 30 acres in a particular area to build a factory. There's also some factories that we've looked at or building infrastructures here locally, probably not to do assembly and manufacturing, but to do distribution and supply chain and other things, which we'll talk a little bit about in the future. But that's also out of Utah. So Utah, Texas, as well as Florida, to basically bring a device like this and many others to reality, along with working with existing suppliers and hardware components and assemblers from around the world. So this uses ClearOS Mobile, the lessons that we've learned there, as well as some of the apps that are tied to it, and hardware and software that is solid. Again, the goal is to be able to have 3 different networks where you've got satellite and then 2, and this steps up from 4G to 5G. So a lot of people may say, hey, we still want 4G as an option, and there'll be dedicated 4G phones. But there's also, it's important to note that the 3G elements are going offline. So it's important to have coverage at the same time, but we're also aware of some of the other concerns. We believe that the future, a lot of the stuff that we just went through is going to go digital, including payments. And one of the big parts of this phone is connecting up with other satellite environments. And so you have connectivity no matter where you are in the world. One of the big things that's important, actually, I was going to send a message off. One of the big things that's important, earlier today, we got another message from Vanuatu, which was one of the original countries. I'm going to pull up the Pacific Union. When we look at the Pacific Union and the region, we're talking about Polynesia, Melanesia, and Micronesia. And these countries were one of the original ones. And Vanuatu is actually one of the original, we personally, so literally took the first satellite device into Vanuatu. And they even, after we were there for a month, and they talked a lot about, actually put it in the paper. They put it in the newspaper that said, if you bring a Starlink device in, we reserve the right to confiscate it. And they didn't confiscate ours, but what it was they saw that everyone can actually be connected. Vanuatu has 83 islands and 81 languages. It's very disconnected, very fragmented, but in their constitution, they have decentralization embroiled in it. When we were there, we went through a cyclone, 2 cyclones, category 5s. One was 4, the eye went over us, and then the second was a 5, and it decimated everything. Power was out for 3 or 4 months, not days, months. And so what you saw was ATMs actually ran out of money, but you still had people that figured out how to get the cellular infrastructure up, and they figured out how to get their batteries charged even though they had no power. So with the systems that we took down there, you could actually have commerce. There's another beautiful image of, the prime minister's brother, and then a store owner, and then a wonderful gentleman that actually connected up with everybody inside of a store that runs their environment. I believe that this type of connected communication where cellular phones meet satellite, which is massive advancements, you can now have payments worldwide in real time, even without cellular connections. There's enough bandwidth inside of the waves and frequencies that you can actually transmit over satellite, which creates an opportunity for mobile devices to be able to compute. When we're talking about mobile devices, it's one thing to say, hey, here's a phone, here's some payments, here's connectivity, but it's another thing to say, hey, here's protection that you can actually operate within this new digital ecosystem and digital world, but do it in such a way that's very safe. So we're going to launch some promotions around RSVPing. We're going to launch some alignment with different partners. We're going to launch, finally, the decentralized reputation score for the earlier adopters of this. And really, to adopt it, it's really simple. It's a simple $69 a month, and you get the hardware, the software, the services, voice, data, text, and satellite. Again, all 3 different services, cellular services for 2, and then satellite, all for $69 a month, and first and last month is due up front. Now, what's important to know is you actually pay in this digital US dollar. Remember I told you earlier, USD is actually not created from the same folks that create the actual dollar sign. So when you look at this dollar sign here, and we dissect this particular component, there's an element. So you have this dollar sign, which is created by a particular reserve. Then you have USD, which is created by authorized banks to actually loan out. And that's how money creation actually happens at scale. That's not the cash-based money. But what we're talking about is digital US dollars. And these digital US dollars can only be authorized or purchased through receipts that are digital receipts based upon purchasing silver and gold. So for those of you that have been watching this, it's literally unrolling, and people can actually get involved in this and cryptographically pay a bill anonymously and build up a digital reputation. Very, very important for the future. Right now, we all run off of centralized reputations. We don't control the data going in. We don't control the information they're profiling. And we don't even control if someone else jacks that information and steals our identity. But yet our credit scores can be impacted, and all it comes off of is a scoring algorithm based upon data sets from different providers. Those different providers being, TransUnion, Equifax, Experian, that links to the algorithm from Fannie Mae, not Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, but the Fair Isaac score. So it's Fair and Isaacs, 2 different guys that came together to create this thing, 40, 50 years ago. So with that being said, credit is a massive part of this, but payments and digital payments are a key part of it. It's also important to note that the Tesla phone will actually be one component. There's going to be a whole nother component when we talk about automobiles. And so for those that have not been paying attention, it's really important to know that there's going to be a shift in the automobile industry. And it's not just something where, okay, Toyota is now building a hybrid vehicle that has an engine and other components, or XYZ organizations doing something similar, or maybe even Volvo is going 100% electric, or, there's so many different news. But what we're talking about is the ability to actually launch a vehicle subscription that is also tied to that same type of reputation, but it ties also, just like your phone, to privacy. So you have decentralized identity that actually can subscribe as a private member. Remember when we started this meeting, and we do every single week, and we say the same thing. This is a private membership association. There's constitutional laws that govern that type of experience where you can actually control your own identity, your own data, and you can do it privately and be constitutionally protected. Now, I would argue with you that when we go through and we look at some of these types of things here, when we look at this type of a growth trajectory, one of the biggest things is the Security and Exchange Commission is literally going to have to be held accountable for what they've done, not just to shareholders that they're supposed to protect year over year over year, but for what they've done to industries. And one of the things that President Trump said when he was going through the election process is he said, I will fire my first day in office, I will fire Gary Gensler. And what you started to see was Gary Gensler actually resigning around this period. And then you start seeing American Express and Wells Fargo and other banks and payments this for a house and payments that for cards. And then you start seeing rumors of ETFs, and you start seeing other large organizations that are really centralized secret combinations, BlackRock, Vanguard, start putting money into these types of environments. And each cent means a lot. Why? Because there's over 100 billion of these things floating around out there. So max supply, this is 100 billion. When we look at that number, 100 billion, when this goes up a penny or a dollar, if it goes up a dollar, that's $100 billion in total market cap growth. That's a big deal. So when we take that logic and we layer it over what we're talking about here around a private membership association that actually uses that same technology, uses the ability for organizations or countries. In this particular case, it's not USD, it's DALA, which digital USD is equal to DALA, which is the currency that was in the Hawaiian Kingdom before the American environment came in, which is a whole nother conversation. So imagine being able to purchase a Tesla for $199 or digital USD per month that includes maintenance, service, roadside assistance, insurance, all of it, basically subscribing a vehicle that is registered to a particular individual or an environment. Imagine the vehicle is registered to an entity that people can be private members associated with it. Maybe it's a country, maybe it's a kingdom, maybe it's an environment, but they're actually becoming a part of something that is bigger than what we're used to traveling around in. What I would challenge you to look at, in 1961, there was a Geneva Connection in Vienna. And that agreement, that contract, is recognized globally. And there's diplomatic immunity and rights that tie to it that can link to private membership associations where privacy can actually be realized at a governmental level worldwide. So when you layer all this together and you talk about transacting or traveling or purchasing something, the automobiles and the actual phones, so this is actually the checkout process for the phone. So they'll come in different colors based upon what people start buying out of the gate. But these Tesla phones will link tightly into the actual Tesla vehicles. And we'll start up a new business that will actually fund those. As a matter of fact, tomorrow we meet with one organization that basically has 900 families inside of it here in Utah. And these families have been, I would say, profiled, approved, underwritten, authorized, funded. And we will actually help get 900 cars and vehicles. It's actually the Utah Foster Association. So foster kids that have homes, and I've personally grew up in foster homes, so I know what kind of scrutiny and what kind of realities go into underwriting and authorizing them. As a matter of fact, I actually had a gentleman, I won't be specific, he's living in Africa right now, but he and his family of six kids, so 2 adults and 6 kids, 8 people total. He was an LA County sheriff officer and basically went and got his foster license to take me in as his 7th child. And the scrutiny that these environments go through to understand who they are is really interesting. But you also know that there's a viability. So imagine phones, and this may sound weird in how it all links together, but imagine in the state of Utah, these foster kids being tied into vehicles, and the vehicle, and I'm not saying like seatbelts, but there's actually some Big Brother type programs that pull them in that actually help kids to connect with like supercars. So we're not talking about supercars here, but imagine supercars that are linked into a new type of subscription around humanity. And instead of somebody buying a $500,000 car, how many Teslas, especially if these Teslas maybe came off a lease? And people may think, why would we even get involved in cars? We're a technology company. And here's why. It's all about data. Imagine if we could actually work with Tesla, not only to launch a phone, but to actually launch a vehicle, and the data on the vehicle is as secure as the data on the phone. Now, people may think, well, we need that data for heuristics, but what about the individual? Does the individual get that data? And what if we, from a private membership association, could actually supply that data to the individuals, just like they get their photos, their texts, any other data that they have? So if people, for those listeners that may not see the screen, I'm basically just logging into a ClearPhone, and then I've got these Clear apps. Now, these Clear apps basically have data that's behind them as well as the apps. And if I lose my phone, I just grab another phone, I put in my 12 words, and these apps and the data in these apps come back. Now, imagine it's not just an app. Imagine it's not just a camera. Imagine it's a car. Where you go, how you drive, what is recorded, what is seen. What if that data could be the individuals? In my opinion, electric vehicles are amazing. They really are. They're an advancement that humanity needed, and I'm grateful that they're here. But there's also surveillance that goes with them. The ability for a vehicle to be locked remotely, the ability for a vehicle to be controlled, whether it's stopped or even driving, or seat belts to be snapped in and not let loose. These are controls when these things can be tracked and controlled and surveilled, that are not something that is a freeing environment. And so what we're trying to do is get in front of these things before, I'll go back to the dialogue around Mr. Musk talking about artificial intelligence as a massive threat for humanity, and 80% probability that it goes right. And the 20% probability, we want to take that down to next to nothing, because artificial intelligence, machine learning cannot follow cryptographic derived keys. That's the bet. That's what this is all bet upon. So imagine if you could actually take your data from Google and Apple, where you currently are, and you migrate through a Clear environment into an X environment, or you actually take your own data, and it's not just photos and videos and recordings or whatever you've got, but it's data that's streaming from your life. And maybe it's not just with automobiles. Maybe it actually ties to other types of things and use cases in life, because it's not just about driving. It's not just about, a phone device, which, by the way, 92.5% of photos nowadays and videos are taken on a camera that's on a phone. But if you look at all the cameras that are here, these are all different kinds of cameras that literally, whether it's for vlogging or travel or scuba diving or you name it, these are different types of devices. But imagine if these devices also were tied into your life. And imagine if this environment also tied the same types of things. It wasn't just cell phones and cars, but it's devices that all link into these types of environments in such a way that we can actually do better with the resources and assets that we have here on Earth. I won't go through the details of this because it's way much premature, but there's a lot of connections between the different things that we've talked about. I'm going to leave the topic at that, and then I'll come back to another topic. But let's open it up for questions, thoughts, feedback. You've observed some really important things that we've talked about and hinted at in the past. Today's the first day you're actually seeing it. Thoughts, concerns. Some people would say the vision is too broad. I would argue, look at what Google's doing. Look at what Apple's doing. Look at what a lot of these different big companies, look at Amazon. I mean, they're talking about from trucks all the way to data centers. These things may feel like they're broad, but it's focused on core competency around derived keys with decentralized storage. And the bet is that people need to own their own identity and data. So when we're talking about all these different topics, just kind of keep that in mind. So let's shoot some holes in it. Throw some curveballs here. Provide some feedback. This is your time, folks. I'm going to stop talking.
Michael,
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to wrap I understand the dollar sign. I understand the USD. I'm just trying to understand how it all works together, because just a constitution was written in the US where our form of currency is gold and silver, and we've gotten away from that.
Mm-hmm.
The Federal Reserve was instituted, and they put in the dollar, at least what's known currently. There may have been the dollar previously, but what's known currently. So I'm trying to understand how the banks can actually fund the USD with the digital gold and silver when there's nothing really like in a law
Okay. Really,
providing that.
This is an amazing question, and I'm actually going to take you on a walk while we do this.
Okay.
We'll show you around while we do this, because your question is absolutely phenomenal. Okay. For those that haven't had training, we're going to do some fun stuff here. I'm taking you on a walk because your question really can only be answered Can you guys hear me okay? Hello? Can anybody validate? Come on, guys. Wally? Hey, Jay, welcome, welcome. Well, I'm just going to assume that you can see this. So the question from Susan was very valid. And what we're talking about is USD and the currency that's tied to that, basically going to a payment through a
Michael,
shop.
can you start over? We kind of got in the middle of your
Okay. Can you hear me now?
presentation.
Can you hear what can you?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay.
Now we can hear you.
Okay. Awesome. It must have jumped access points when I walked around. So I don't know if this is going to zoom in well enough, but here, this represents US dollars that basically go and fund a purchase. Now, this can be through ACH, it can be through credit cards, but you're basically making a purchase of assets. And what we're doing is building in with Shopify through an API, the ability for anyone to use currency. So fiat currency through US dollars, New Zealand dollars, etc., pounds, marks, yen, rubles, rupees, renminbi, you name it. They basically can purchase with a shop bullion. So this is like gold or silver in bar, foil, or coin format. And those assets come from the earth. Can you see that? So this actually says earth, and they're minted. So they're minted from the earth, and it just so happens we're working with mines and mints and bullions and creating companies that are managing all of this. And then basically what people are doing is they're buying from a US dollar a digital receipt of a physical asset that's serialized. So these assets are actually purchased, vaulted, insured, audited, and then shipped to people if they actually want them. So there should actually be a purple line that goes right here. So if they want, they can actually shift here to here if they want to have it shipped. So people are basically buying silver and gold. And what's unique about the jurisdiction that this is in, Utah, in the Constitution, silver and gold are actually a form of currency, just like the dollar sign. Now, when we say USD versus dollar sign, they're different animals. So really think about what we're doing is we're basically taking a purchase from US dollars to buy silver and gold through a bullion type process. Think about that like a pawn shop or a coin dealer. So there's a real purchase there that's happening. And then they actually get a digital receipt. Now that digital receipt can actually buy things kind of like what we just talked about. It can buy automobiles, it can buy phones, it could even possibly pay for homes. Now this is not that far-fetched or foreign. Why? Because in the last 10 days, that there's actually been announced that home payments within some of these large bank institutions will actually accept digital payments. So these are digital payments that will tie to digital assets, whether it's native from the digital world, or whether it's clear from the clear companies, or whether it's pesos that are digital from the Mexican environment, or maybe Kala from Atui, or maybe Dala from Hawaii. And all of these types of things are basically tying in, like Dala is equal to one digital US dollar. So I hope you're able to see how it all flows together. And then it could tie, these things could actually tie to other assets. Maybe you could even replace Dogecoin with a real-time asset. Everything over on this side is a real-time type asset. And then in the middle, you've kind of got other assets that are slower, like Bitcoin or like Ethereum. Then you've got some that are actually faster, like Tron or Solana or XLM or Ripple, which we went through today. But all of these tie to the Life app that we just looked at. They have a payment component. They have an exchange component. They have a credit card component. For those of you that haven't seen those, I'll pull one up here real fast. So you can kind of see that here. Okay, so there's basically the ability to put all of this together in such a way where the individual can purchase, because right now the complex parts of this is people being able to actually say, well, that's great. I see something and I'm interested in it, but how do I actually buy it? How do I pay for a home? How do I pay for a car? How do I pay for other types of things in life? Maybe a cell phone service. How do I pay for these things in such a way where it's seamless, it's real time, it's in a jurisdiction where laws can be created that we haven't even thought through. Think about private membership association laws and diplomatic immunity laws and how all of this can basically enable a future that can be digital, like the digital world. So I don't know if this makes sense or answers your question. I don't even know if you were able to go through it. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear
Cool.
you. So I think I'm still stuck on, so I know the US Constitution allows for gold and silver. The Federal Reserve is what, at least my understanding is, it controls the fiat. But what is controlling the digital currency?
So the digital,
Like, who's overseeing it?
so the digital currency is based upon the equal dollar value. So for instance, if you buy a silver 1 ounce coin, and let's say it costs $35 in US dollars, whether that's the dollar sign from the Federal Reserve. So they basically turn in their $35 for 1 ounce of silver. That's a fair market value that the world actually can agree to. And so once we get past that, people are like, okay, that's how I come out of the US dollar to get a digital asset or a digital receipt. And then they can basically purchase assets or products with that. So it's a super simple, easy way to get in and out. The current reserve, the Federal Reserve and reserve banks basically create money based upon, supposed approvals in House and Senate and budgets. And I believe that today we don't truly have, and there's a reason why the Federal Reserve, when they talk about auditing it, they don't really go and audit it. Even Trump and others, they said, hey, when I get into presidency, we're going to audit this and be transparent. And maybe they audited it and when Trump originally got elected, but they were never transparent around what the actual results were. And so what I would argue is when we go through these different chains or these different currencies within these different countries, there really is no ability to actually understand, is everybody seeing?
Yes, we are.
So
I
all
am.
of these different, like this data is like 7 years old, maybe 8 years old. So is it really real? Are these data sets really real? And when we move into a digital ecosystem, I'm not talking about digital money like Venmo. I'm talking about cryptographic assets where, for instance, if I come down here and I look at how much is the max supply, there's 100 billion here. Well, Stellar's not. It's half of that. And when you actually take in like Bitcoin, it's 21 million once it's fully all out there. So these are basically for-profit companies. So XRP is a for-profit business with a board of directors with elements of centralization. For those of you that are kind of new to this conversation, when we back up a month ago, we were talking about this type of reality. Ripple and a lot of the leaders were massively funding this house, this side of the world on the left. And this ecosystem basically was patching its wag into Ethereum with the World Leadership Organization. And particularly, it thought it would raise $300 million or so with an offering. And it hit like, I want to say they ended up with 9 million or 11 million. And then somebody came in, Tron folks came in with another 20 million to get them over that 30 million. But the point that I'm driving at is I really believe that the store of value that we're currently seeing, where the assets are over $2 trillion behind this, ties to real-time payments that are actually tied to real-world assets. And that's why the gold conversation is so important. That's why we lost this when we're actually taken off the gold standard, and why it's so important to go back onto it. A big part of it is not that gold or silver are such a massive important asset, but it's because after the Second World War, the federal environment said to the states, don't create your own currencies. If you're going to do anything, it has to be backed by silver and gold. And that's where those standards basically came into play. But in 1933, we actually lost that standard and went from a gold standard basically just to an oil or a petrodollar environment where the US dollar or USD was actually used to purchase oil. And so everybody in the world standardized on it. And now you find that when you fast forward, you see the BRICS countries. So we're talking about, believe it or not, Ethiopia, the country that's working with us now in Africa, India, China, Russia, Brazil, these core countries. And by the way, we spent time in each one of these countries, even Saudi Arabia, over a month before COVID broke out when travel was easy. And these countries are now adopting a standard within the BRICS ecosystem that is actually based upon, believe it or not, this technology. And so when this last week came out and Trump basically said this, no, it wasn't that. Trump said this. This was yesterday. So this is the idea that the BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over. We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful US economy. They can go find another sucker. There is no chance that the BRICS will replace the US dollar in international trade, and any country that tries should wave goodbye to America. So what you're starting to see is positioning and posturing even before Trump's in, that talks about using digital currencies to basically walk away from the US dollar. The US dollar is used as a standard. And that's why when we take it and we back it with other things that are equal to the US dollar, like a stable asset, but it's in a different jurisdiction, there's a conversation to be had. So what we want to do is help in 2025 be a part of the future on how these things are actually productized, commoditized to the future. And that's one of the reasons why we're not like these other environments where it's just whatever fair market value is what the price is. And other people can throw money into it. But the net is having it physically backed by silver and gold as we grow is really important. And one of the things it also does there is it stifles the growth, because the limiting factor will eventually be how fast you can produce silver and gold, or the price of it goes up because of supply and demand. But that is a global currency and price that the world is already used to, is gold. So the US dollar is the global standard, but and I'll kind of back up, I'll go through a slide here real fast that kind of goes through the standards. And what was that for down? Well, maybe. Yeah, that's just too far. Well, the bottom line is about every 80 to 100 years, there's a new standard for world reserve currencies. And the reason why the world reserve currency was talked about with the gold standard was because you could quantify how much was actually deployed or slow it down. And I would argue that that same type of thing is what can actually be realized here. I'm not finding this slide. It's an important slide, but so if you can come in and purchase silver or gold, I'll use that analogy for $35, and then you get a digital receipt for it. And then you can actually make purchases within other systems with real world products like phones and like cars. These things are material value. But when you're actually making them, you're making them within a type of a system that is based upon a digital transaction. So in other words, you're buying gold or silver to actually get this asset, but you're doing it in a single transaction. So right now, if people actually wanted to go into Ripple, for instance, there's a lot of people on this call that understand the complexities of going into a digital asset. How do you do it? Where do you buy it? Do you actually own it? Like, there's a lot of people, if you actually look at the roots of where Ripple came from, there's an organization called Mt. Gox. And that was one of the biggest heists around, I shouldn't say heist, that's not the right word, but there's a lot of people that don't have their asset, namely Bitcoin. And it's primarily because they didn't own the keys to it. And that's why what we're talking about within the digital world is all around key management. If people own their own devices and their Life app, and they can take it to other, like you could have 5 devices with the same Life app and transacting, but it's going to look for your fingerprint or your face as an identifier on every transaction. There's no username, no password. But the real value that the digital world has actually added here is actually quantifying identity and being able to give it back to the individual. So I know I've talked a lot about an answer around gold, and you're challenging that, does it make sense? So let's go back to your question and make sure that I've answered it to a satisfactory level so we can keep understanding this. Does this?
Or I just have I guess a simple question. It's like, who's overseeing the digital asset? Like, is it a corporation? Because I don't think it's the Fed.
The digital assets that are here, or the digital assets that
Well,
we're
just
kind of
like
looking at?
the one that's going to be worked with the gold and silver. Because obviously Bitcoin, they manage their own, but banks are slowly accepting Bitcoin and stores are slowly accepting it, but you can't necessarily purchase a lot of items with it. But if this digital gold and silver is going to eventually be the standard in America and not the paper dollar, which is the Federal Reserve,
Mhm.
I mean, who is overseeing that digital asset?
So the physical, I think you're asking who's overseeing the physical asset, right? Not digital. Or
Well,
you'd say
who's
both?
overseeing the process? Who's overseeing the process of the digital asset?
Okay. So there is an actual association called Precious Metal Association that actually manages a vaulting type service that's a third party. And then they have an auditing service that comes into the vaulting service. And then they have a insurance that actually backs it. So the combination of those three things will force the physical asset, and then it's a one-to-one relationship at the time of purchase that converts whatever the fair market value is for that gold. So for instance, if someone buys a silver ounce, let's see if I can find that real fast. If they buy a silver ounce of silver, let's say this one right here. Let's say the fair market value here was 35.15. That actually gets serialized and it actually gets into a clear case. And on that clear case, we're not actually touching the silver itself, but we're actually writing and etching onto the clear case that transaction. And so the physical transaction and the digital transaction basically have a third-party auditing process that actually backs those assets. And that's where we got away from things in 1933, where I believe that Roosevelt or whoever came in and basically ran an audit to see how much is our reserves versus how much we've issued, and they didn't add up. And I think that goes to the basis of your question. It's like, how do we know that they're always going to add up, right?
Well, I mean, right now our standard form of currency is the paper dollar, and then the coins, the quarter, the dime, the nickel, the penny. Because we right now cannot transact in a store gold and silver unless it's a gold and silver shop by just buying gold and silver with using the dollar, but we can't use gold and silver as actual form of currency to make purchases, even though that's what is our Constitution says is our currency in America.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, where I'm just like, you talked about the banks being able to use the digital asset. And so I was wondering, how is that all working with the digital asset and then us being able to interact and make purchases?
So
like where's that central?
There's two parts to your question that are really important to focus on. I'm going to jump to the last part. The way to interact today, most folks accept Visa even more so than dollars. So the Visa rails, the American Express rails, the MasterCard rails, and those types of things tied to the credit cards, which actually can be spent. Like there's a lot of people on this call that'll actually spend crypto or gold that can convert in real time when you swipe. So currencies will basically become aligned. For instance, I can be in New Zealand with a US bank account and a US dollar, or in Japan and spending in their currency, and the foreign exchange basically just automatically switches it. And so that reality and the systems behind it, which is a whole nother conversation, it automatically happens through what the world calls foreign exchange. So you're going from one currency to another. And in effect, all we're talking about with Visa and MasterCard and taking a purchase where they don't accept crypto anything, they may accept a whole different type of currency. Maybe it's Canadian dollars. You can actually transact with Visa today real time. The problem is Visa's slow and Visa's expensive. But when you combine to these types of assets, it can be in real time. So that's a part of the answer on the spending side. And as well as, the importance around shopping. And when we talk about and there's a whole slide part around shopping and how shopping is really what people vote. If you buy local, create local with a local currency, you create a local product, buy the local product, and then use a local currency, you're literally creating the future of decentralized communities and environments. I'm not saying that people don't sell products from other countries and all that fun type of stuff. But when we talk about what Trump is talking about here, it all kind of ties to the same reality. So let me go back and just try and simplify an answer. You basically use fiat to buy gold that gets a digital receipt. The auditing behind all of that is there's an auditing component of the physical gold, and then the ledger is the digital receipt worldwide in real time. And it's a everyone can see it, everyone can understand it. Well, I shouldn't say everyone can understand it, because right now it's getting more mature and the reports are getting better, but there's transparency. It's all out there. So And then on the other side of it, people accepting it. For instance, what we're talking about here is having a phone being able to be purchased. I'll log in, I'll show you a little different interface. This phone can actually be purchased on a monthly payment. So you're actually paying for, T-Mobile and a satellite connection and phone hardware, all with a monthly payment. And all the user knows is, hey, I went and actually bought dollar or digital US dollars, and now I can purchase. So, and a lot of people are going to want to say, hey, I really want in on the growth that's tied to this. When we're talking about the same core technology, but it doesn't have real world use cases like what we're discussing in some cases, especially on the seller side. But then, you'll see bank standards and treasury assets shifting over to these types of assets and technologies. Why? Because it's intelligently organized systems that can manage payments at scale and cryptographically proven. So if someone messes with the ledgers, which by the way, we just completed our full rebuild and audit, like literally today, within the last couple of hours. We're talking about a bunch of different nodes that we totally killed. Like the server's just gone, everything's gone. And then you have to rebuild all of it. We wanted to see how long. And that's one of the reasons why we know that we're at 18 million transactions, is because that's actually what we were syncing. And so imagine when things come down here, we're trying to calculate what the rebuild time is before we actually stand on the digital world and start to scale it. So it's on one hand, it's a process of how it actually happens. On the other hand, it's a verification that it'll actually work. And we wanted to track it within the actual ledgers to show, hey, these things went offline, but they still can't transact. And when they come back online, you can start picking it up. It's amazing. The ledgers and technology is just intelligently organized. So the auditing and verification on the digital side is all done. That's the core answer to your question. The transactions and the receipts is all done. What you have to do is figure out, how do you get into the digital world from the fiat world, and that's the gold and silver. And then how do you get out of it if people are not accepting gold, silver, or digital anything, and they just want the US dollar transacted by let's say a Visa payment. So I know there's lots of words here, but I hope that it's making sense. Is it? If not, please tell me, and we'll keep digging into it.
I mean, it's making sense. It's a whole new form of money and currency that's changing. And if we can get away from the Federal Reserve, I'm all for it. I'm just hoping that also the digital currency that could be changed is going to be still, like, it's going to be decentralization. Because if you're still using Visa and MasterCard, that's not decentralization.
No, you're centralizing decentralization. That's one of the reasons why Visa would go to an organization and say, hey, we actually want to take Bitcoin transactions and layer them on the Lightning Network, which was funded by Visa and banks, to basically centralize decentralization, just like how the credit cards do. And so we're working our guts out to build the alternative to that, where decentralized systems aren't actually centralized when people use them. And that's why we're going to all the troubles of linking up, gold purchases to then asset purchases that are totally digital. So, and imagine if people start seeing the value in that, and they start saying, hey, remember back in the day when you actually went to your employer or your spouse did, and they said, I want to get my payment in direct deposit. We used to get checks, right? And then we went from checks to direct deposit. And then it was like, oh, I want to layer on this technology that actually lets me put my money in this account, and this account, and this account, so I can spend it in these ways and manage money better. But ultimately, where'd the money come from and where's it going? And that is what cryptographic systems do. The reason why you are positive on removing the Federal Reserve is because there's no transparency, there's no accountability, there's no auditing. And the financial meltdown that happened in 2007 and 2008, which is why we have Bitcoin, was because the insurance companies, behind all of these other asset-backed supposed mortgages and housing and whatever else, they actually went belly up. And when the insurance companies that were insuring the assets and the payment streams went belly up, that's when everything started falling apart. So, this is a solution to all of it. It is a solution to getting everything totally in public, everything totally transparent, everything totally honest, but people still retaining their identity. That the retaining the identity through these derived keys and key management and key rotation is so important. And, that's the basis for what, again, the digital world is here for that. So I think it's really important, if the lights aren't going on for you guys, like Susan, if I haven't still simplified that answer, keep pushing on it until it really clicks in your head. Because I want all of you to be able to say, hey, from Aotearoa to Canada to Australia to Mexico to Ethiopia, all these different environments, and the people that are coming in, if it doesn't make sense within their mindsets and their environments, we're not doing something right. Maybe it's around how we're not communicating it. Maybe it's around, technology, or how it's applied, or so it's okay to say this doesn't make sense. Like Danielle's done it a ton of times. It's like, Mike, you got to make this simpler. You got to communicate this in an easier way. You got, so there's nothing wrong that you can say, that, because I think any criticism, positive or negative, will help us to improve. And that's why we hold these meetings. So we just went through some pretty serious stuff around a new type of car here, so a car subscription, so to speak. And this stuff is still futuristic. So there's a lot that has to go in around a private membership association. And some of the meetings we'll be having tomorrow, and then these 900 different foster families, and how we're going to link it all together, how they're going to use it, and then how the actual phones are going to tie into the cars. And people may say, well, why even mess with the car industry? And the real reason, these cars are game changers. These are not just golf carts that are modified. These things are computers with wheels, and it just so happens the brakes don't wear out, and the engines go 600,000 to 800,000 miles plus. Some are going 1,000,000 miles, whereas mortgages or financing or vehicle loans historically have been 5 years to 7 years max. But these vehicles will end up going 15 plus years. So the time value of money, there's a whole nother game. Like people that are used to paying $299 or $599 for a car payment, they can literally go and get in this environment, or in this environment, and actually pay, hardware, software, and services for a low monthly fee that they're used to just doing a flat line on. And then they can be connected anywhere in the world. And being able to bring that device out and connect it with a car and connect it with digital payments is really, really important for humanity. And it's really important for people to see that it can be done with identity that can be decentralized, using derived keys, so that we're not at risk with machine learning and artificial intelligence of profiling us and literally enslaving us. And if you don't understand the enslavement side of it, which I know this group here does, let's dig into that. But I want you to be really critical of what you've just seen. If it doesn't make sense, I really want you to say, hey, I'm not getting it.
Hey, Michael, it's Beck.
Hi.
Hi. I think that I do understand, I guess from my level of communications that I'm in, and how these ecosystems are important for, I think blockchain decentralization for me is how we understand how to differentiate our linkages between, if it's our organizations or communities or businesses, at the same time that we can kind of take back our, ownership and sovereignty and work together collaboratively. And if anyone, I just want to say that if anyone is having a hard time understanding, I'm happy to help anyone that might be stuck out there, because I know a lot of this space. I also know about the supply chains and the hyperledgers and how they kind of link together. So I see like the tariffs that are happening right now. I mean, depending on if it's, money or if it's digital currency, that's going to make the biggest difference to how we can innovate the space. So if anyone does want to, talk, then I'm happy to talk to anyone. If anyone feels stuck, if they don't want to, speak openly on here.
There also is someone down from Australia. Raj is new to the call. He's in Australia today. And
okay, hi Raj.
We were talking about.
I can put my details in the chat if you like.
We were talking about decentralized identity and what's going on in Australia around the identity stuff. And he's of the auspices that there'll be, leadership change, kind of like what happened here in America, and then a lot of the things they're doing with digital identity will be repealed, which I absolutely hope that that's the case. But, right after that is payments. So once and to be honest with you, they don't even need to solve the identity. They've already done it. They've already literally did digital identity. So we're trying to rebuild digital identity and payments and the gold standard all at the same ecosystem. So other thoughts or comments or feedback?
Yes, I'm sure. Me again. Okay, so Michael, I'm in Canada. There's a lot of stuff.
I think it's Bob. Bob's on. Bob, we hope to hear from you, buddy. But
sorry about that.
there you go. Okay, but you come back, Bob. That was what it was. But you come back if you got something to say. Danielle, it's all you.
Okay, so I want to purchase some silver. Let's say I'm in Canada. Can I do this? Can I purchase some with US dollars? Can I purchase some silver and then get a digital receipt for it? And then could I, let's say, load a debit card with the amount, with what I've purchased, and I could spend it that way?
Yeah. So let's go through an example. So right here, this is a checkout in US dollars. Okay.
Right.
But let's say we wanted to go to Canadian dollars. So you can actually see that it just dynamically shifted that. So this is in Canadian dollars. So you would add it to the cart, and then you would get the fair market value for that 1 silver ounce in digital dollars. In this case, you
And
could.
how would I pay for that?
So you would actually, here, I'll walk you through it. So you could check out in Canadian dollars, and
Right.
you could actually say, I'm going to go ahead and just fill in one here. This is one of the coolest things that I've seen. This payment method, where's the payment method? This pay by bank is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. So you could actually wire this right up to your bank account and say, every month or every day, I want to buy this amount. Or let's say you want to pay for it with credit over time. Let's say you want to pay for it with a credit card. Let's say you want to pay for it with other cryptos. Let's say you want to just ship in a check and you actually just want to put a purchase order in. That takes about 10 days to process, by the way. But let's say that you want to just pay with a credit card. You would basically go through the process of putting credit card information in, checking out in your own currency, okay? And then basically going through, and it's just like a credit card.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah,
That
it's a
makes
credit card. So
Yeah.
could I pay with a US credit card, but on a Canadian account? I have a US, I have
that's
a
no
US.
problem. That's
card.
so one of the hard things for people to understand is today they've already figured out the foreign exchange situation with credit cards. So you can have an account inside of Australia that has an Australian visa with an Australian address with an Australian standard currency as the Australian dollar, but you can actually go to an American store, or you could fly to America, or you could fly to Canada and swipe that card, and it will pull out of your Australian bank account a fair market value plus whatever kind of increase that the people in the middle of it, the fees. And that's another thing. In another probably 90 days, we're going to start digging into where did those systems come from? How does the foreign exchange side of it work? Where does money issuance come from? How does it all work? And then how does it actually not get the biggest, and all the people, they would listen to this all day long and say, okay, great, it sounds wonderful, but what if an EMP goes off? And I'll tell you what, there's a future that we're all going to live in that we're not going to live under threat. We're not going to. And I would argue, I would say that the current development of current nuclear weapons, not past, you know, we got over 10 million nuclear weapons that are just rotting and we're ruining different things. But that's, by the way, Utah is one of the #1 places that's actually where they go and let these things die and they're waste places. But the point that I'm driving at is EMPs don't have to control the digital ecosystems. There will be EMP-proof firewalls, routers, switches, all of this stuff. For instance, fiber cables are already EMP-proof. There will be EMP-proof, and I can't say cell phones today, but I can tell you we're already starting to work on those types of things. The reason that the cell phones can't today is because they actually work off of frequencies which are susceptible to the actual transistors that push those frequencies. But there is a massive undertaking and effort for EMP-proof based devices to actually be in the world. And I see a future in our lifetime when this becomes a standard. When Trump was in office earlier, he basically mandated that all of the different utility infrastructure and banking infrastructure actually use these types of devices, these EMP-proof devices. Now, they're not created yet, but you'll see that. So we're slowly working through different types of use cases, and it's on the gold side of it, it's interesting, but that's an old business, you know, being a bullion dealer or a pawn shop, those are all, or a coin dealer, those are all old businesses. The question is, can you get it at volume and can you get enough of it? And so I would argue that, you know, you're seeing the average increase of digital assets at like 60 to 600%. For instance, I just showed you a scale of 270% within a week for Ripple, right? So that means if someone put in $1,000, you know, they literally got, depending on which asset it is, but they come out with like $4,000 to $8,000 for their $1,000 investment prior. Now, in some cases, people would look at gold and say, well, I'm just getting, on average over the last 50 years, maybe it's 6% on average. But in the last couple of years, you're looking at 50%. Well, that's not 600%, but it's also not the same risk. So we're trying to tie, as basically the value of currencies, fiat, goes down over time with the time value of money and its money supply, gold will basically go up at a slow growth because of the supply and demand side of it. So the same thing that slows us down will drive the price up. Now, I think that gambling is wrong. I think that speculating is wrong. I think it's fun, you know, but look at what happened with the Mike Tyson fight, right? I don't know about all of you, but I totally thought Mike was going to take it. And I totally think these guys made a bunch of money because he intentionally lost. That's not the Mike that I grew up with, like that I played a little video game with. It's just not, these are gambling. And that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about conservative systems that are honest, that are transparent. That is what we're doing our best to try and build. And that is what the companies, the clear companies, are focused on for the digital world, so that by the time we take our last breath, maybe there's EMP-proof systems. Maybe there's total accountability. And like Susan talked about, you can actually take the Reserve Bank out of the whole system, or the Federal Reserve out of the whole system. That's
the goal. That's really the goal.
Right. But in our world, we're just technologists, but the people that are going to be running the government supposedly are going to be making those decisions. And I'll tell you what, they need so much transparency and data from nincompoops that just don't want to help them. I feel really bad for what they got in front of them, but there is technology and systems and people that already exist that would solve those issues. And I'm just so excited. The future is bright. I hope that we don't have nuclear anything between now and the 6th when Trump gets in. And
By the way, the president of South Korea already
Solved it.
threw the towel in. He's not, he lifted the martial law order already.
Good. Okay, other comments or feedback or thoughts? Or
I just have one
observations?
more
Yes,
question.
Michael.
Oh, sorry. You go.
Yes.
Whoever.
Bob, we'll come back to you, bud.
No, I,
Go ahead.
all right, go ahead.
Go ahead. Bob? You guys both muted you so far.
Oh, yeah.
Bob, it's all you, bud.
So, yeah, no, all right. Going back to the gold and the, making a digital transaction. So if I understand what you're saying correctly, if you buy either the gold or silver in real time, you'll get a certificate that will allow you to spend digital dollars wherever you would like. However, that transaction, will the audit process be part of the digital world or blockchain technology?
Yeah, so your observation is correct, except for there's two steps that you added that's really one. So the digital world has assets in it, like the dollar or the digital US dollar or native. Native will fluctuate up or down. Clear will fluctuate up or down. Those are like assets that are maybe a part of the value of an ecosystem, kind of like XRP or XLM within Ripple and Stellar environments. But the thing that they actually, when you buy gold and silver, you don't get a certificate. You get a digital receipt that is actually the digital asset. So it happens all at checkout. And that's why it's been so long to build it, is like we got to make sure that that is just bulletproof. So from an auditing standpoint, you know, the payment was received and the asset was actually, so the gold was actually issued, and then the actual asset, the digital asset was issued. Now, in these technologies, namely Stellar, Ripple, and the digital world with native, there's actually a clawback capability. So within a certain period of time, let's say that someone does a chargeback on a credit card transaction. So, and let's say that someone actually gets a digital receipt, wants to spend the digital receipt, or they actually want to cash it out for the physical assets, which, by the way, the digital receipt can be exchanged for gold, or maybe go back into whatever currency they came out of, maybe go back into US dollars, et cetera. But the ability for that exchange to take place at scale with products is what we've been working on. And so, Bob, your observation is correct, except there's no certificate. The actual digital receipt is the digital asset. Does that make sense? Bob? Becca?
Yes, that makes sense. I just used the wrong terminology, so
Okay.
I totally understand. And then Ripple, now is that still decentralized, or are they still?
That's a really good question. The difference.
I'm just not clear.
That's a super duper question. The difference between Ripple and the digital world is the digital world has no, it's not a corporation. It's not incorporated. It's not, it literally, the jurisdiction is the whole world. And then countries, kingdoms, nations, principalities, people, individuals, they can all plug into it. It's a technology and an operating environment that the world owns and controls and manages based upon councils and votes, versus Ripple, which is a corporation within a jurisdiction that is controlled by other mechanisms. So I'll say Ripple is a United States of America corporation incorporated under laws where it requests to exist, and it has certain taxation and realities that are associated with it. And so when you look at, now I'm not saying Ripple's bad. I really like the leadership there. I think that the governance structure that they have with the board is good. But I think that, and that has to happen for certain accounts and countries to adopt, and for certain lawsuits to be able to transact. Because how do you go into a lawsuit with, for instance, how does a digital world go and sue the Security and Exchange Commission like Ripple did? Well, they can't. But that's also why the Pacific Union was actually created, just like the European Union. And the European Union goes after lawsuits all day long. As a matter of fact, they just opened up another $200 billion lawsuit against Apple. They've already won lawsuits against large churches. I won't be specific with names. I will be specific with names like Marriott, Amazon, Facebook. Like they're full on this union, the European Union can actually go after organizations because they've provided notice and said, hey, if you don't get consent in this way, we're going after 5% of your revenue. And then they're just going after all the folks. But that's tied to consent. The Pacific Union is tied to privacy and travel, the right to travel and the right to privacy. And when we really understand how important those two things are that we take for granted, I think that the value of what's happening here is going to be very, very important for humanity. So, did I answer your question, Bob?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
It's good to hear from you, Bob.
I'm clear now.
Yeah. Well,
Likewise.
we got to get it down really well so that the rest of the world can actually understand it as well. So, Becca, do you still have that question?
Yes. So in terms of the digital currency side and the financial reset, and then linking the executive order, is the executive order going to be something that needs to be put in place first before this goes ahead in some way, shape, or form, or
So
not?
there's going to be, this is kind of a dream executive order. So I'm going to go to American.Republic country. I'm going to go to governance, and I'm going to go to executive orders. This is a dream executive order that talks about decentralized identity and voting and records. And it would just be wonderful if this thing could be adopted by Mr. Trump. Now,
Okay.
it's not just that simple. He's probably going through others. He's probably putting together different councils. You know, I've met with President Trump. I've talked phones. I've talked tech, and he wants to learn it. He wants to understand it, but he also wants to trust the trusted advisors around him. And I believe that, I hope that he will make the right choices. From what I'm seeing, it's all going in the right direction. And I think that's why we're seeing these types of results within markets. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good dream. And I think that having a digital decentralized executive order is very like, I mean, this is history in the making.
Yeah.
Like really history in the making. I can't even believe that this is happening. You know, I'm blessed to share this life with you guys.
I feel the same way. Yeah, I think that the dispensation that we all get to live in is amazing. Like, we have so much to be grateful for, from the way our bodies can work, at least for those that aren't struggling with, I won't even get into some of the negatives, but I really think that we live in an amazing time. You know, I watched some posts earlier today from Elon that talked about birth rates, and, you know, those are the things that we've really got to worry about because we're not actually replenishing, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I just think that there's so much good. And, you know, I look at 2005. 2005 is going to be the year that a lot of this stuff that we talk about with these rings and these devices around health, and it's going to all come out in 2025. Like shipping, like you can stick it on your finger and actually use it. And then when we think about, oh, well, that can actually control us, and that's not a good thing. Well, but if you link it with decentralized identity, it can actually free you. And then when you link machine learning and artificial intelligence with it, and then in general populace, we can actually prove that leaf provides better than that pharmaceutical or whatever things in life that we want to prove from a data standpoint, because it's the data and the data inside the data that's actually really important. So I agree with you, though. It's amazing to be alive, and I hope that executive orders are made the right way. I hope that President Trump's able to get in. And then I also know that we've got to also have our eyes open. You know, a lot of people look at that and say, hey, there's a lot of negativity. Who's controlling him? How's that controlled? Can we really trust that? And it's a good thing for us to question these things. I think it's through questioning these things, which will really end up when, by the time we all take our last breaths, which hopefully it's around the same time, you know, I think we're all similar ages, you know. I think what I won't even ask Raj. He's a vegetarian Indian that also spent time here in Utah. And I'll put him up. Let's see if I can. I'm just going to have people guess. What do you think this beautiful man's age is? So he's on mute right now. But Raj, if you want to unmute and just say boo to everybody, since this is your first time in, maybe you haven't navigated around. There you go.
Hi, Michael.
So we got a vote.
I usually jump online on LinkedIn or Facebook. I've been monitoring you guys for the last few years, but Michael and I go back, what was it, 2017, 18, when we first connected?
Yeah. Yep. This is an amazing mentor to me. I actually wish, and I told him this last night, or maybe it was the day before, I wish we would have brought him in as the CEO of Clear Cellular instead of a different gentleman from similar roots. And he warned me, and I didn't listen, and we lost like 3.8 million. And so a lot of people would say that doesn't even matter, but this gentleman here, we got a vote of 51. Any other votes? Bob joined. So you want to tell us? 42?
42. Oh, that's nice. I turned 66 this week. There you go.
So anyways, I hope that we all get to pass around the same time frame. But by the time we do, I hope the world's a much better place than where it currently is. Not that it's in a bad place, because I think it's a beautiful thing, but hopefully we're able to use technology in a very good way for the betterment of humanity. So other thoughts?
For the
or
record,
comments?
Michael, let me just remind people, I used to live in Utah back in 1980. And I think Michael was a 4-year-old back then. And I worked for a technology company. The customers we had was Novell, WordPerfect, and a company called ADI. We used to supply them computer equipment back then. So that gives you some idea of the background.
Yeah. I was actually 15, but that's awesome. Okay.
Oh, were you? Oh, okay.
No.
I thought you were
No, I would have been. No, you're right. I would have been 5. You're exactly right. I would have been 5 years old. So, other thoughts or comments?
And
Go ahead.
Yeah, Michael, I just have a quick question. Has there been any talk about there being like Congress making a law in regards to what the executive order is going to say? Because the executive order it's not as powerful as a law.
You know, I think that within the 4 years, I think that those laws will be enacted. Hopefully, you know, I don't know how long we get the House and the Senate, but they can basically do what they want to do. And I think they're just going to push it through. They got the House, the Senate, the presidency,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they're just going to.
They only need a majority.
Some
So I'm just hoping, because, I mean, the next president can change with another executive order. So that's
Yeah.
why it would be nice to have it as law.
I think that they're going to get very serious. There was a comment that was brought up earlier, and maybe that wants to be brought up as a topic here, but around, you know, southern border and northern border basically getting consolidated in. So what we talked about before around the Americas, because it's really one world, one people, and if we can all benefit and manage through it, you know, there may be some benefits there, but different conversation probably for a different day. But back to your point, I do believe that it will be law by the time the next 4 years rolls around. So, but we'll see. We'll see. Other thoughts or comments, feedback?
Just one, Michael, one more. Your comments regarding the US dollar being the default trading currency for oil and other transactions globally.
It's not
I have a
anymore.
problem with that.
2017, it actually.
Why?
Well, 2017, it stopped being that standard. That started in 1933, but in 2017, and a lot of people didn't know this, but the renminbi was and it still is till today. So 2017 until now, the renminbi is what Saudi Arabia and others started selling oil to Russia, to Japan, to Venezuela, to Brazil. All over the world was on the renminbi. So what people also don't know, and what I think many, including myself, can learn from you on this, and maybe what I'm going to say you don't agree with, but from what I understand within China, there's actually two different types of currency values. One that's internal to the country and one that's external, where sales and foreign exchange would actually be tied to. I could make the
Not
same
against the
argument.
US.
What's that?
Sorry?
I can make the same
Not against the
argument.
US. US is a standard rate. So if I was to walk into a bank, they will use the quoted rate in United States dollars and give me cash.
Right.
That's what they do.
Right. But because you don't, for instance, locals in China don't operate off of US dollars. They operate off of renminbi. And so that renminbi,
Definitely not.
they can have a different value to what's going on. And I would argue the same thing, that inside of America, it's the same type of thing. For instance, the funny money that was dropped off on pallets to Iran years ago under Obama versus the 75 million that was just sent over to Ukraine last week from the US, the value of those dollars are different than the value of the money that was just spent on someone's mortgage internal to the US last month. It's because of access. The International Monetary Fund and the Reserve Banks, they control access that hit the foreign exchange. And it's all around, for instance, if you want to convert money back and forth, you actually lose money. So people try not to do that because they pay the fees on the exchange rate.
Yeah.
And because of those exchange rate fees, you could argue that there is a different value of the currency, but I think it's even further than that. So the only reason I'd say that is because many, many years ago, I read a book on it, and that actually makes a lot of sense, but why do they do that? And anyways, so.
Just to clarify a couple of things on that. I mean, I'm a Trump supporter. I was really looking forward to his election. In fact, I'm thinking of moving back to the United States because of that. I went and found my old Social Security card. I might have to activate that now. But also, where I have a problem with Trump's comments in the last day or so is, why is he dictating to BRICS what currency they should use? I don't agree with that. I think BRICS is a separate organization.
When you really
it's their business. It's got nothing to do with it.
When you actually really understand what they are using, it's the same types of systems that we've been talking about here all day. So they're actually rolling out those systems. And so for Trump to say what he said with that slide that I brought up, I think all it is a posturing that said, so think about it this way. If Trump says the US is going to adopt the same standard, then what happens? Then the US dollar can convert through the foreign exchange side of it. And that's why these conversations around foreign exchange and the different assets and the different ways that they're stored and audited and transparent ledgers, it's all really, really important, because if we fast forward a couple of years from now, I believe that it's all going to be totally shifted over and played out. Now, does that mean that Visa's gone? No, but the way that Visa is used and accessed will be very different. And there'll be a ledger behind the scenes. So, like the FedNow currency in the United States, I think that will, on the 20th of January, I think that's going to convert over to Ripple ecosystems. But the nice thing about all this technology in the digital world with Stellar and Ripple, it's all one technological platform that is the same. So you can actually swap and convert in a very seamless way in one system, in one wallet.
And another point to add there, I'm not sure you're aware of this or not, but back in the 70s, I believe, when Taiwan was just being established with the assistance of the United States, they got tired of shipping container loads of cash in US dollars to Taiwan. So what the Fed did in US was they created a set of plates, currency plates. They changed it slightly, and they sent all the printing presses to Taiwan so they could print US dollars for local use. That happened for many, many years. I'm not sure how many billions were printed, but that was the basis of Taiwanese economy and all the technology startups that happened. It's a very interesting story. So there was a slight difference in the notes. And I first went to Taiwan, would have been in the 80s. And I looked at the US dollar looked different. And that was the explanation I was given back then.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know this, but the treasurer for the Clear Foundation, I won't tell his whole name, but his first name is Greg. He actually lived in China for over 20 years. He was the chief operating officer for China Construction Bank, which was the second largest bank then. Now it's the largest bank in the world. And he actually helped negotiate over a 9-year period the settlement of those plates being returned from Taiwan to the United States. And the priceless artifacts that the Taiwanese took from China in the Second World War when they left for their safety. So you had, and the settlement dollar amount was actually $91 trillion. Think about that. $91 trillion as a settlement between the US, Taiwan, and China. And everything went back. And that's why I was concerned around, China going into Taiwan and, but it ended up being something totally different. It ended up being Russia going into Ukraine, and for a totally different reason. It wasn't for settlement. A lot of the stuff is for NATO. Today is the 6th of December, which I think this is a 30-year anniversary for when.
It's the 4th. It's the 4th of December.
4th. So it's an anniversary for what? Can you remind us?
The third.
Is it the 3rd?
Today's for you guys.
It's the 4th for
us.
you.
It's 4th.
Okay. All right. Well, there's a document that was signed between Russia and Ukraine, and it's just right now is a massive anniversary that's coming up, and I hope that in a very short period of time that war can be over, peace can be realized, and we can start focusing in on not monetary stuff, but living life and just having basic joy and happiness.
It's not a Ukraine or Russian war. It's a United States. It's a Biden war. It's as simple as that. It's got nothing to do with anything else. It's straight out NATO playing games, trying to provoke Putin and Russia. I mean, as soon as Trump gets in, NATO pulls back, the whole war is over. I mean, and the gravy train that Zelensky is living on is going to disappear. So that's basically the end of the war before Trump gets in. And this is why I kind of hear you when you say that there is a danger that Trump may not take office in 20th of January. I mean, this could be a very major reason. Yeah. Very similar reasons why Robert Kennedy was taken out because of his stance on Cuba. So,
that's exactly
it's
right.
Interesting.
The big thing that I think, I totally agree with you that this is driven behind the scenes with the U.S. The Budapest Memorandum that was signed, there's an anniversary that's right around now. I want to say it's the 6th. I might be wrong. But
it's 1989 is when they signed with Brezhnev. This is the agreement you're referring to?
Yeah.
When Russia gave up all its territory?
Yeah, the Budapest Memorandum is what all of this stuff goes back to. And, I'm not saying that Russia was right by what they're doing, and war in any stretch is wrong, and control is wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's why I really believe that technology can actually set us free. Like you look at what's happening, you think these sanctions against Russia has actually made them struggle. It's forced them to do what we're talking about doing right now. Everything goes digital, identity is realized, all the vendors and currencies are all standardized. I mean, they've been forced to do what everyone in the world is going to have to do, but they did it before everyone, and they're reaping the benefits of it. For instance, one of the countries that I won't even go into that. So what were you going to say, Raj?
It is the 5th of December.
So it's the 5th. So
right.
It's for you, it's tomorrow, and for us, we're 2 days away. But that Budapest Memorandum.
That's true. Yeah, this is where Russia made a point that NATO would not have any base surrounding its surrounding Russia.
Yeah.
And it started by Obama. He's been pushing the territory since those days. And finally, Putin gave up. I think he sent some stern warnings starting 2010 and then went again 2012. This was the final basic thing. There you go.
Yep. So that's what it all comes down to. So wouldn't it be just wonderful if on the anniversary of this puppy, we could literally have peace here in a couple days? And, you know, my heart goes out to so many that have just been uplifted. And, you know, and I've also got some responsibility and other things are on my mind daily, but that's a different conversation. So,
Well, a similar conversation is taking place with the people held by in Gaza, the Israelis held in Gaza. I think Trump made a very similar comment yesterday, I believe it was, regarding you better release this or hell is going to break loose. Very similar to what President Reagan had done with the Iranians. If you remember the conversation back then.
yeah.
It was 1979, when you were 3 years old, Michael, in case you've forgotten.
Probably not the same incident. What did he say?
But similarly, they had hostages in Iran, and Reagan, under the peanut farmer president he had, which is very similar to Joe Biden back then, he couldn't do anything about it. Reagan came in and said, they better be released before I take office. On the day that Reagan was appointed, those hostages were released and brought back to the United States. I think Trump has made a similar call to say they better be released before he takes office, or all hell will break loose, was his comments, I believe.
Wow.
So that'd be interesting to monitor. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. One thing that's also interesting, and then Jay, I'm going to ask you for your feedback if you're listening, buddy. It's been a long time since we've had you on. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we reviewed today. But this last week, Mr. Biden pardoned his son, which there's like a 300-page document that goes through all of the illegal stuff this guy did. And it's just interesting to see when we got people like Snowden that are forced into exile, and people, you know, there's a couple people like Phil Lane Jr. mentioned a lot of indigenous folks that are still imprisoned inappropriately. And so it'll be interesting to see how the pardon stuff takes place too, which is a conversation that's not even relevant to any of us. But wouldn't it be nice if Trump could just say to the world and say, hey, give me your feedback on this. And next thing you know, he can communicate with people in real time, kind of like what's happening on X. But imagine cryptographic voting systems that's actually validating all of it. So those are some of the things that we're hopeful to actually bring to humanity. So next thought or question or comment? Jay, if you can hear me, it'd be nice to hear your voice. If not, no worries. But other thoughts? Okay.
Well, I have something.
Margaret, go ahead.
So hi, Michael. Thank you for your time. And if Jay comes back, I'm happy to step off.
Yeah.
Good. So, I'm sorry, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Margaret. It's all you.
You can, okay. So my focus is a little different than what you're talking about tonight, but with the new technology, the Tesla car and the satellite phone, I'm not sure how this works for frequency protection for the body, because I'm just looking into the EMF type of protection, information, and there's kind of a lot going on there from what I'm learning. I'm not sure how this impacts satellite types of transmissions.
I think, a lot of, when I first I've owned almost every kind of Tesla that there is except for the Roadster. And when I first got my S, I thought I was getting headaches when I would drive in it. And I was just sensitive to the EMF that would come off of it. And I talked to a lot of folks about it, and I do think that there's risks there that we don't understand. I think that there's risks with the phones that we don't understand. I think that shielding is something that is real. And it's, we did have some shielding cases that were tied to some of the phones, but I think that's a continual issue but it's something that as humans, we're willing to give the risk up for the reward of the convenience of using it. So, but you're spot on. And as a matter of fact, we were going to send a message off to a wonderful gal who actually built satellite phones. And now what she's doing is building things that protect you from them. So wonderful.
Okay,
Yeah,
we'd like to know more about that another
Yeah.
time.
exactly. So
And also I wondered, just as a little, plant a little seed, so would ClearScan Technologies be able to create some sort of protective field and so forth and so on? So, just maybe they already do, but I don't know where they're at the moment.
Not ClearScan, but the ClearTune technology was,
ClearTune.
yeah, that was the intention for all of that. And that was through quantum entanglement and remote healing and things like that, which all that technology I think is totally real. The issue is it doesn't focus in on the decentralized mandate that we've got, and really getting out the ring side of it to communicate with the body through yes or no questions, then gives you the other side of it to prove that it's actually working or not. Because without it working, people are just going to say, it's just hocus pocus. It's not real. So that's kind of the thoughts there. But does that make sense, Margaret?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I appreciate that. I haven't kept up with some of the former conversations, so thanks for all of that so far. I'll go back and review some of the other interviews that we've done.
I'm going to read this real quick.
One thing to understand is that Trump speaks in code, and when he refers to the US dollars, it is according to the standard he wants to restore, with it being issued by the Treasury and backed by gold. Other countries can choose to do the same with their own currency rather than adopt CBDC.
Yeah, absolutely. And that ties right to the conversation we just had too. So, well, these are supposed to be hour-long meetings. We touched on a lot of topics tonight. We're coming up on 2.5 hours. Thank you for your time, your attention. We will plan on seeing you next week. And hopefully, as we mature, these meetings will turn into formal council meetings with formal dialogue and voting. Right now, a lot of it is based upon feedback and guidance as we direct through this and navigate it. But we're making progress that's fast, but there'll be a time where governance has to set in and go from there. Thank you for your questions, for your time, and for your prayers. We will see you next week. Much love, everybody. Bye-bye.